in 1993, I moved to Atlanta. The original plan went something like this. In Tallahassee, I was feeling a bit like a big fish in a small pond, musically speaking, which in hindsight shows an awful lot of arrogance on my part. Anyway, the keyboardist from my college band, well, he and I both found apartments in the same cheap apartment complex down by the airport south of Atlanta. Our drummer was supposed to move up the next year, and the three of us had grand ambitions about more original music plus some fusion and some jazz and meeting a bunch more musicians and touring a bunch. It was supposed to be our big kind of move into the big time. None of that happened. Anthony, our drummer, never moved to Atlanta. In fact, last I heard, he was living in Amsterdam, playing a Thelonious Monk tribute band. And Pete, keyboardist, well, he ended up going to law school and is now kind of a big deal in the state of Georgia judicial circuit. Not sure exactly how. And so began the longest dry period of my life, musically. I wrote and recorded a few demos, but then I lost them in 1996 when my apartment burned down. I also lost every instrument I owned, every piece of gear I owned. Nothing survived. I still miss that black Les Paul. Because my then fiance and I had no insurance, we had no way of replacing anything we'd lost. My old boss, though, he was part owner of a local club, and he allowed us to use it for a benefit show. My dad came down, we jammed some, so did Derek. Donna Hopkins played an amazing set, and during the jams, my cousin Dwayne, who I think was like 7 at the time, played a couple of tunes on drums. Derek gave me a guitar that night, which became the only one I owned. It was a Washburn double cutaway Les Paul kind of a model, sunburst, 2 humbuckers. Played great. That one lives with Brooks now. For an amp, I had a friend from Tallahassee, Kenny House, contact me about an old Ampeg VT22 that had been modified, changing its output from 100 watts to 50 watts. And with that, I bought a used Sound City 4x10 cabinet from Music Go Round here in town, and I finally had everything I needed to play again. So I started going to shows more, mostly at the Brandy House, Fuzzy's, Smith's Old Bar. Plus, I also did the occasional jam at Fat Matt's. I made a few connections, went to a couple of auditions, but nothing ever worked out. In 1998, I made up my mind that if I couldn't get hired, I'd just start my own project. I figured if I was going to put something together myself, then I'd make it entirely what I wanted, no compromises. And so after some soul searching, I decided that meant one of 2 things. Either a gypsy jazz string quartet or a fusion trio. One evening in 1998 at Smith's Old Bar, when I relayed these ideas to Colonel Bruce, he told me to get in touch with his old drummer, Eric Sanders. I did. Eric agreed. We added Brooks, and by the end of the year, the Yeti Trio fmuppered itself into existence. Eric and I have been working together ever since. Outside of immediate family, I think it's fair to say that he's the person I'm closest to. And here's something I can tell you about Eric. I've never met in my life a musician who is more dedicated or more focused. His knowledge goes deep. So even though I felt I had a decent handle on Soundgarden after becoming familiar with Bad Motorfinger and Super Unknown, it was Eric's insistence that Down on the Upside was not only his favorite by them, but also one of the best albums ever made. Well, that's what convinced me that I needed to add Down on the Upside to my list of albums to dig into. You'll be hearing Eric's thoughts about this album in just a bit, but first, I need to cue it up and see how it sits with me. Here we go. I'm going to try and keep my first impressions quick, so let's see. Overall, there are a couple of things I'm hearing through the whole album. First, these songs use some very next-level harmonic structures, and rhythmic structures for that matter. Some of these tunes have White Album, Beatles kind of changes, and for some of this, it seems pretty clear that bands like Mastodon got their inspiration here. Next thing I'm noticing overall is a tonal tendency towards darkness. And I don't mean the usual kinds of darkness you might expect from harder rock or metal. Not the life-affirming horror show themes you might expect, and not the shoegazing aspirational things you might expect from emo. Instead, these are a lot of resignation, helpless feelings. Just a couple of songs that stand out for me to mention real quick. Ty Cobb. It rocks, but here's what I hear him singing. Applebite. Reminds me a lot of a song called Blues for the Double V from Jenny Scheinman's amazing album Mischief and Mayhem. If you don't know that one, check it out. It's one of my favorites of the last 20 years. The riff in No Attention is very deep purple. I like it. Oh, and check this out. And Unkind. Wipeout. Well, so far so good. But now let's dig in deeper, hear from Eric, and see where this all goes. I think we should start by letting Eric give us some background.
For me, Down on the Upside is the most important Soundgarden album. It's deep, honest, introspective, and unapologetic. They had done the indie label Underground in the mid-'80s with Sub Pop and SST Records. By the late 80s, they were on a major label with A&M. In less than half a decade in the 90s, Soundgarden released what I consider to be the Holy Trilogy: Bad Motorfinger, Super Unknown, and Down on the Upside.
No doubt he's a fan, right? Like I said, his knowledge goes deep.
Bad Motorfinger solidified the band as bona fide stars, with hits such as Outshined, Jesus Christ Pose, and Rusty Cage. With Super Unknown, their stardom was catapulted to the pinnacle of the music industry. Black Hole Sun is the everlasting anthem from that 15-song epic opus.
Well, that should bring us up to present, to Down on the Upside. All right, please continue.
With Down on the Upside, the band decided to produce it themselves, and that's what makes it stand apart, at least to me. It's also telling that though they were on top of the world, they were down on that upside. Even the subdued colors and rainy silhouetted album cover, with the band members either walking away, standing uncomfortably, or kneeling at a distance, depict the heavy emotions of the music herein.
For sure. The more I listened to this, the more the themes of depression and anxiety stood out for me. Uncomfortably so at times. I mean, Applebite, for example, that was an early standout tune for me. It's a great song with interesting things happening musically. But the poem that is sung in the background actually started negatively affecting my impression of the song.
Let's talk about what we're hearing. Pure brilliance for 16 songs and nearly 66 minutes. The band's three biggest influences abound and are easily detected throughout: the Beatles, Black Sabbath, and Led Zeppelin. But this record is fully Soundgarden to its core. Left alone to their own devices, they created an album that is raw and labyrinthine. All four members contributed music, and 3 of the 4 wrote lyrics. Blow Up the Outside World and Burden in My Hand were the main singles and videos from this disc, both of which were penned by the inimitable icon, Chris Cornell.
In talking with Eric about this album, our discussions would get emotional sometimes. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that to Eric, Chris Cornell is as important as, Bob Dylan or John Lennon.
There are a few short songs on here, but don't let those gems towards the end of the record get by you. Tighter and Tighter, Switch Opens, and especially Overfloater should not escape your ears. Those who prefer when the Knights of the Sound Table riff heavier will be appeased by Ty Cobb, No Attention, and especially Kim Thile's Never the Machine Forever, which is in 9/8. That song has ties to their beloved Seattle brethren, Mother Love Bone.
When I first sat down with the lyrics, this is kind of interesting. You know what I thought of when I got to Tighter and Tighter? I immediately flashed back to AP English. Early in the song, they use the phrase sudden snake, very alliterative kind of phrase. And immediately, I thought of that Emily Dickinson poem, the one she wrote about being scared of snakes. A narrow fellow in the grass occasionally rides. You may have met him, did you not? His notice instant is. The instant and snake. That's what I thought of.
For those musos out there, This is essentially a prog record. There is so much odd meter on this album. Right off the bat, with the lead track Pretty Noose, we get a 5/2 polyrhythm. For the uninitiated, that simply means 5 notes evenly spaced over 2 beats. For the somewhat initiated, this sounds similar to the familiar quarter note triplet rhythm, but with 1 less note. It's not easy to pull off, but of course these guys nail it perfectly every time. They also use this cool rhythm in the chorus of the song Somewhere from the album Bad Motorfinger.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think it is fair to say that there's an entire prog record here. But, I also think it's fair to say you can't deny the grunge and the heavy metal aspects either. Pretty Noose is actually a good example, yes, and does indeed have some next level composition and musicianship in it. But this move right here, that's pretty damn grunge.
Zero Chance is an absolute tour de force and should be studied by all musicians who appreciate odd meter and time changes. It's absolutely unreal. Matt Cameron is a master magician at masking the meter, as he does beautifully here during the verses. The next track, Dusty, also navigates many time signatures. Both of these songs were composed by the underappreciated and overlooked bassist, Ben Shepherd.
Eric told me specifically to look out for those 2 songs, Zero Chance and Dusty, to see if I could correctly identify the time changes. I gave it a shot. I think I did better with Dusty than with Zero Chance. I kind of do have to laugh, though, because at the time of my first listen, I was cleaning out my garage and listening on earbuds. And it occurred to me, someone walking by the house would see me carry a box, stop dead, and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then continue walking again.
Finally, let's talk a bit about the main separator that sets Soundgarden apart from any other band on the planet. Chris Cornell, who was the group's original drummer and has been my personal idol for more than 30 years since I was a teenager, is a composer, player, performer, lyricist, and vocalist of unmatched proportions. His genius lyrics are stamped all over 14 of the 16 songs from Down on the Upside. Unfortunately, there are many lines that read differently 25 years later and knowing his fate. For those who don't know, Christopher John Boyle Cornell hanged himself after a Soundgarden concert in 2017.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was referring to earlier concerning the bleakness I'm hearing in this album. 2017, by the way, is the same year my father died, which is another thing I don't like to talk about too much. This could be why I keep finding myself wishing more of this album was instrumental. But to be fair, I think that about most albums. I'll let Eric have the last word on this one, and then we'll wrap it up.
The album begins with a song called Pretty Noose. Yeah. Here are a few other lines from throughout the record. Nothing seems to kill me, no matter how hard I try. Nothing will do me in before I do myself. This next one really does not sit well with me at all. Kill your health and kill yourself and kill everything you love. And if you live, you can fall to pieces and suffer with my ghost.
Okay, final thoughts. I like Soundgarden. I think they're fantastic musicians. I like Down on the Upside. There's music here that is innovative and challenging. I like that I know this album, but I don't like spending 66 minutes with some of the thoughts that result. I do like the fact that Eric is my friend and my colleague. Thank you, Eric.